Welcome back, lovely people. My name is James Johnson. This is my lovely mother, LaDonna. We've read the first 5 books of the Song of Ice and Fire series. We've seen the first 7 seasons and the first episode of the 8th season. And tomorrow will be the second episode of the 8th season, the last and final season, and second of 6. So, welcome back. We're talking about theories. Nothing we say we know for a fact. We're trying to talk about what might happen, and sometimes we get on a thread we think is likely or at least interesting and want to share it. So this particular one is about the fiery hand. The long and short of it is we're both of the opinion that the fiery hand is going to be a huge part of this last season. I want to give a huge amount of credit to Elise, who was a part of the episode discussions last year. She specifically mentioned this and made us rethink it. And the more we thought about it, the more it's completely clear. And I would specifically refer you to the scene with Tyrion, Varys, and the Red Priestess in Meereen. That is a hugely important scene. So I'm going to give this away to my mom to give you the whole gist of it.
I'll let you talk about that scene because that's not my notes. This is a topic that I have not seen. I'm not going to say nobody has done it, but it is something that I think has been overlooked, and we would have too if not for James's friend Elise, who I think is absolutely right. So I'm giving her all the credits. God bless you. The fiery hand is what it's called. And it is a group of warriors dedicated to the Red Temple. And there are several Red Temples. All of them worship Rhollor, who is the Lord of Light. There are several of them. There's one in every single free city in the Essos area. The 2 biggest ones are in Lys and in Volantis. And the reason this is important, let me set this up, is that Melisandre left. If you'll remember, she had a conversation with Varys that she was leaving while at Dragonstone. And Varys told her, don't come back, it's dangerous. And she said, I have to come back. I have to die in this place, and so do you. Where is she going? She's going to Volantis, where she was raised. That is where the biggest Red Temple in Essos is located. It is not only big, but it is 3 times as large as the Sept of Baelor. It is a huge Red Temple in worship of our fire god, Rhollor. The fiery hand is one faction of the Red Temple. They are warriors who are raised like the Unsullied, similarly. Not that they're castrated, but they are raised to be warriors. Like Melisandre was sold to them as a slave, as a child. Her name was Melanie before it was Melisandre. But these people are branded with the flaming tattoos across their faces. They are the people who will defend the Lord of Light in the event of an Armageddon. In the Red Temple, we also have Red Priests and Red Priestesses, and also temple prostitutes. You can leave that out. It has nothing to do, I think, with the end game here. The Red Priest, they light a fire, and this is important. They light a fire and pray through the night for Rhollor to bring back the dawn. So, they also have Red Priestesses. We've seen several. One is located, she's the beautiful Asian woman who was in the courtyard in Volantis with Tyrion and Varys that looked at Tyrion oddly. We also have Melisandre, who was a Red Priestess. And we have Kinvara. Now, Kinvara was the priestess you saw walk into the throne room where Varys and Tyrion were waiting before Dany came back. She, twice in that scene, is called the first priestess of the Red Temple. The first. Twice they say it. It's important.
I think she says it says High Priestess of the Red Temple and the first servant of the
No,
Lord of Light.
It says first priestess.
Okay.
Took my notes.
That says High Priestess.
This is something else. Her full title, according to the books, is High Priestess of the Red Temples of Volantis. She is known as the Flame of Truth, the Light of Wisdom, and the first servant of the Lord of Light. Now, for her to go to Varys and to Tyrion, actually they called her in because they wanted her help in order to convince the people to support them at that time. But she knew some things about Varys. And remember, Varys doesn't like magic and that kind of thing. But Melisandre is heading to Volantis to get the fiery hand. Now, the interesting thing is that we've seen the foreshadowing for this. If you will note, and James, will you bring up a picture of the Red Temple, please, just so people have an idea of what it might look like? That's from some of the iconology in the books. Yeah. When we see Jojen in the, let me think where he is. He's in the room where they are being held by the Night's Watch, and Jojen is very, very ill. He says to that guy, "You're going to die tonight. I saw the flames, or the snow buried you." Similarly, Bran says, "How will we know when it's the end?" It might have been Mira who said it. One of them said, "How will we know when it's the end?" And it flashes to the scene that James is showing you. Jojen looks at his flaming hand and says, "You'll know." So when you see the flaming hand, or the fiery hand come in, this is the end game. And we've got all the factions coming together, but they are important because they light fires to bring back the dawn. And this is the Night King. The sword that is so important that is still missing right now is called Dawn. We're going to talk about that later. So be looking for these people. I think this is absolutely where Melisandre has gone. So she will bring back her army, very similar to the foreshadowing of the Golden Company coming in for Cersei.
And we'll mention the Dawn thing in another video. The other video we're going to have to redo from last time. So I just wanted to talk about a little bit about how they would fight. So fighting, as far as magic is concerned, we've seen very little of it. It doesn't seem to be something that can be called upon at will. It's more something, I mean, arguably so, because Melisandre she mentions that she uses drugs to manipulate some people, so that's not so much magic as it is potions. But we know that she had the shadow baby, so that is a form of magic that Rhollor can do, and we know of the resurrections. Also the swords that light on fire. These are all alleged conduits of Rhollor. So those appear to be a little bit you can't depend on them, miracles of some sort, but none of them are fighting. So how would these priestesses and priests fight? We've seen Thoros fight literally with his sword, so certainly having an actual army is one thing. The reason I bring this up is to suggest the possibility, again, who knows, that there will be fireballs of a sort. And the reason I mention that is two reasons. Number one, Martin plays Dungeons & Dragons. George R. Martin plays Dungeons & Dragons, and one of the classic spells, if not the classic spell from Dungeons & Dragons, is Fireball. And it's one of the strongest spells that you can cast to do the most damage, because it hits a lot of people all at once. It does a lot of damage to every single one. It's also what the Children of the Forest did. Now, they weren't using Rhollor magic, so to speak. They had some kind of ball that represented their magic, which they threw and lit on fire, but that is definitely a fireball of some sort. So that could have been foreshadowing for however the priestesses and priests may fight. In addition to sword fighting, they may throw fire at certain things.
I need to clarify something. The priests and priestesses are not the ones who fight. The fiery hand is their warrior faction. Okay. Now that when I think of fiery hand, I think they are the ones that have the flaming swords. I think that they gave that power to Beric. I don't know about fireballs, but I think their fiery hand is the flaming sword. That I think they kind of gave that power to Thoros and Beric to use. But be looking for them; they're coming.
And the powers that the magic is granted to are available to some and not others. Yeah. Melisandre wasn't so sure that she'd be able to resurrect somebody, and we certainly never seen Thoros give birth to a baby.
Melisandre's also a Shadowbinder, though. and that gives her the power of light and shadow to create things. That's
Is that
according
something
to in the books.
referenced in the books?
Mhm.
Okay. But people who follow Rhollor are granted varying levels of power and differing powers. We just haven't seen the extent to which that is possible.
Correct.
What is possible? For example, Beric Dondarrion worships Rhollor, but isn't a priest of Rhollor. He is a warrior that's been brought back several times. Thoros is a priest of Rhollor and apparently has the ability to bring somebody back from the dead, but by his own accounting, he did not expect it to work. He just said it because it was the only words he knew, and his friend was dead. But Melisandre didn't seem to believe she was capable of resurrection, so even she doesn't have the full swath of capabilities. So certainly there is the potential for capabilities through Rhollor worship that we're not aware of, and if they exist, then certainly the fiery hand would be capable of them. So I don't know what it is, and they can't go out of bounds of what the reality is that Martin has created, but we have specifically seen the kind of fireballs. I'm just suggesting that as the one, if there was one that would be most likely other than swords lighting on fire, I would say that it's fireball. Not the same way that the children of the forest do it, but the sense of them throwing fire.
Well, again, there's no foreshadowing of that. There's not anything in the books I can reference in that. They are supposed to have flaming swords. That's all I know. So be looking for them, folks. They're coming. And I hope the elephants come.
God, so does Cersei.
I was really counting on those elephants.
Ridiculous. Thank y'all for Kinvara. Is there anything else you wanted to say on here? Just make sure we covered it all.
Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think they'll be at Winterfell.
So one other thing is,
I don't think they'll be at Winterfell. I think they come in at the final battle, because that's what Jojen said. How will we know when it is the end, said Bran or Mira. And Jojen says, you'll know. So don't expect them at the Battle of Winterfell when it falls.
And something else to consider as far as the fiery hand, what side are they on? Kinvara specifically told Tyrion and Varys that they are for Dany because she's the princess that was promised. She is the one to bring the light to the darkness.
Well, let's not get into what that prophecy might mean or who it might mean, because some people still think that Jaime might be Azor Ahai, but the fiery priests are waiting for Azor Ahai. That is who they're looking for, Azor Ahai. And can I clarify, when I say they won't be there when the attack comes to Winterfell, the fiery hand won't be at the first attack at Winterfell when they have to retreat, but look for them at the end. Okay?
And we don't think it'll happen at Winterfell, but if it does,
it may when they go back to Winterfell.
Why would they go back to Winterfell?
Because
we've said multiple times in God's eyes where this is happening.
Okay, we don't know. I don't want to go into too much.
But she's really saying, we're playing devil's advocate with each other. She's really saying if they go back to Winterfell, it won't happen the first time that the fire hand comes back. The fire hand won't be there the first battle.
That's right.
So what I was saying about who do the fire hand support, they specifically reference supporting Dany to Tyrion and Varys, but that is based off of multiple things. And we know that part of which is her heirship, we believe, is part of which is her being the heir to the Targaryen throne. However, we now know that that's not the case if Jon is the rightful heir. So who would they pick between them? Dany is certainly the representation of fire. If Dany were to join the Night's King, then would that change their calculus at all? And let me propose the possibility that this storyline ends with magic being suppressed to the extent of near extinction, so that in 1,000 years people will wonder if it even exists.
Which is where we started.
Which is in Westeros is where we started.
True.
So
I'm not so sure if they think that if Kinvara also says that Dany serves her lord. I don't know who Dany serves. I think
we know it can switch because we watched Melisandre switch multiple times.
That's the thing I'm saying. I mean, are they just saying that because she's got firepower? And because she's got dragons? I mean,
it certainly has been set up storyline wise for the followers of Rhollor to not really have not really be able to point to proof of their god, and being susceptible to different interpretations of not only prophecy, but allegiances.
Well, that's religion.
It is. And I talked to my mom about this. There's multiple different forms in which religion comes, but it seems to me that Rhollor represents the concept of, okay, things, and this is a stretch, we're just talking here. Rhollor represents the concept that, okay, so let's presume miracles do happen. There are things that happen in the world that are currently unexplainable. And they could happen immediately after prayer. Someone saying, I prayed for this to happen, and then it happened. There is no way to prove that I know of between it being an actual Deus Ex Machina or it being serendipity. And everything that happens.
Or being science.
Or being science, because those questions seem to be, ultimately, there are more and more questions. Further down the rabbit hole you go, the further the rabbit hole goes. And I don't know if that's really how it's going to work, that ultimately we could have one total answer to how physics works between multiple different all universes further back to the Big Bang, potentially through it to the negative time. But Rhollor represents the idea that, okay, miracles happen, and you can even ask for them to happen, and they happen. But how do you attribute that to your particular God? What if and I'm just proposing a crazy possibility that's certainly not what's going on in Game of Thrones. What if it were a trickster God, a God that's intentionally fooling you to serve their own means? And there's multiple different ways to go with this. The point is, all right, let's presume miracles happen, and sometimes they happen when you ask for them from a particular God. That doesn't prove that God exists. It doesn't prove that God is doing it. It doesn't prove that God's motives. All it proves is that things happen without an explanation. And one way to tie this in together is to talk about how those things happen in real life. For example, John gets stabbed 1 million times, including in the heart. It's theoretically possible, with all the million battles that happened throughout human history and all the many people who died, that somebody got stabbed so many times and went into a catatonic state and was believed to be dead and then came back alive, and everybody thinks they were raised from the dead.
Well, this is a fantasy. There's some magic in it, whatever it is.
There is, we presume. However, a lot of that's explainable theoretically through some science fiction. And if this is part of Martin's 1,000 Worlds, then it could be explainable through that. For example, Tuff from Tuff Voyaging has a thing that he wears in his hat that allows him to control the minds of certain creatures. That would be like warging to someone who didn't understand. And certainly in one of Martin's books, in the 1,000 Worlds, he mentions that when humanity was tossed to the celestial winds, so to speak, after a great war, that some of the cultures were so isolated that they went back to medieval times, and at some points they had used terraforming to control weather on planets, and without the interstellar abilities anymore, those went wonky. You could theoretically end up with strange seasons. I'm really far out there. I just mean to say that without knowing for a fact where these magic things come from, we can't say for certain. And that leads to the same idea as the prophecies being really uninterpretable. I saw the great battle in the snow, Davos. I saw it. Okay, you won't fucking be there for it if he's dead. You won't fucking be there for it. Okay, but it happens. Does that mean Rhollor had an influence on it? Does that mean you happen to see what the future would hold? Or does it mean that you happen to see something that you really believed and it happened to come true later? That doesn't prove it's a real vision. And Melisandre says she specifically gives people stuff to have them have hallucinations. I also want to juxtapose this with Bran. I know you're thinking I've gone way off, but I think it's still relevant to Rhollor at least. Bran,
it's real relevant, I think.
Bran, we know, has gone back. Oh, even that is a little bit tossed asunder. But at least for Hodor, we know Bran went back and did something to Hodor. And I don't want to go down the whole time travel stuff. You can go back to my previous video about Bran and the Night's King, our previous video. But Bran certainly could be giving people visions. We know Bran has visions. Talked about this before, but Jojen has visions, but he's arguably not a green seer. He seems to get the vision. He can't warg. His visions may be given to him. And when Hodor was given the vision, he went into an epileptic seizure. So does Jojen every time she gets gets the visions.
And Mira says when Asha or Rickon says, what's wrong with him? What's happening to him? And Mira says the visions take their tolls.
No, that doesn't.
And look what happened to Hodor.
And that doesn't. So to juxtapose and then talk about Ned arguably hearing words on the wind, words are wind when he hears father on the way up that tower. Mm-hmm. But So there's kind of different levels. Is it a literal vision? I'm seeing something that could be the future, your future, not Bran's, who's in the future, giving you a vision from his past. Bran's had literal visions in the show of his own when he touches the weirwood tree, some of which appear to be from the future, at least the explosion of King the Sept of Baelor, although we also don't know the timeline. So that could be happening.
Well, it's never happened before.
That could, no, it's that point. We don't know that because they could be showing us Bran further along in his story on the timeline. So Bran's story went faster and he's seeing something that already happened. He just doesn't know it yet. I'm not saying that's true. But for Bran, here's my point. For Bran, we know that he can give visions to the past, if only for Hodor. I don't know if that's a vision, but he can affect the past. If he could show somebody a vision, we know he's doing that. So now that puts a new perspective on the Rhollor thing. And I'm going to presume, it's my opinion, that all of these Rhollor things are not going to be explained because that's the point. Some of them may be. But where do they derive and what's the intent for any of the magic? Hold up. Any of the magic or prophecy, in my opinion, needs to be obfuscated. But some of them could be explained. For example, the Hound could have gotten his vision through Bran from the future. I don't know. And I would argue I would prefer the opposite. He's kissed by fire, but does that really mean that that's why he's having the vision? There's no good explanation for this. But Bran, we can see give somebody a vision, and in hindsight know that that's what happened, and he's a god of the sword at the end.
Why do you think Bran gave somebody a vision? Where'd that happen?
We just talked about this.
He didn't give Hodor a vision.
We don't. That's my point. I said that a minute ago. We don't know that he can give visions. However, he went back into the past and gave Hodor an epileptic seizure. Jojen is having visions, and arguably somebody is giving him those. And if they cause epileptic seizures, that at least mirrors Bran. In addition to us knowing that Bran has visions, and then this goes into the whole thing we talked about previously. Bran is the three-eyed crow. Jojen specifically told him that you can't kill it; it's you. Which Bran, in my opinion, that means Bran is in the future, sending himself into the past to make Bran into Bran. So Bran in the future is giving visions to himself through the three-eyed crow, the three-eyed raven. And in addition to Bran being able to literally access the weirwood tree, which is seeing everything happening now and in the past. But if you're able to give yourself in the past visions, those visions can be from that past perspective's future. And if Bran lived long enough with an obsidian dagger into his heart, then he has all of time to give somebody a vision. But if he knows he can't affect the past, Bran made Hodor into Hodor while Bran was on the Green Seer throne. In order to get the Green Seer throne, Hodor took him to the Green Seer throne, which means Hodor had to be Hodor. When Bran was on the Green Seer throne, he made Hodor into Hodor. Hodor took Bran to the Green Seer throne, where Bran made Hodor into Hodor. It's a cycle. It's called a Dijin particle, D-J-I-N-N particle. The point you asked was, well, how do we know Bran can get visions? We don't, but the signs are there.
Well, and
there's also Benjen, who was the Children of the Forest made, and he said he was made by the Green Seer, by the three-eyed crows. By the Green Seer, he says the three-eyed crow. Mirror says the three-eyed crow is dead. He says no, he's not. He's right there. He says not. Yeah. He's
that's
alive again or something like that.
Yeah, that's a cryptic scene. Go back and relook at that scene with Benjen and Bran. The other thing is, somebody talked to Varys through the flame. Who was that person? Is it Bran? Because the only other time that we see somebody actually react to something said to him by a person who's not there is Ned, when Bran yells father. So is it Bran sending these messages? I mean, that will be explained.
In the book, we have arguably one more with Theon in the Godswood, if I'm not mistaken. Doesn't he hear the tree say Bran? Doesn't Bran voice come
Theon has something. All right. Well, that was way off from the fiery hands, but
the point is, fire hands coming back. Melisandre's going to get them. We had Kinvara in there to say that she is the high priestess, practically the Pope. If she likes Dany and is involved in Dany and believes Dany's the princess that was promised, or whatever it is, Azor Ahai. Oh, you meant to say something about the sword when the sword gets plunged into the ground with Melisandre and Stannis. And anyway,
that was more on the Dawn one.
Okay. Love y'all.
Bye.
Bye.